We do need a jingle.
Now going live. It's lit.
Thank you.
I think that could be it.
It's
How do you
composed.
feel doing that every time we...
Okay, great. If you remind me, I'll do it. What up, peeps? How y'all doing? Too much.
Should we start by going around introducing ourselves again?
Yeah.
Preferred pronouns. All right. I am Brittany. She, her, hers. And
What's your favorite dessert, Brittany? What do you want to eat late at night? It's midnight. I need sugar.
I really want a Schmackery's cookie. I miss that.
That sounds
So if
fun.
you guys can send it to me.
It might be a little hard by the time it gets to
I really want. I will pass it to Jasmine.
That's my name.
Yeah.
She, her, hers. God. I don't know why I always overthink introduction questions. What do I like for dessert? You know what I'd really like right now is to get on a plane and go back to Italy and have some real gelato. I say real, like it's that complicated of a dessert to make, but I don't know, it was just better there and it was cheap and it was everywhere and I miss it. That's all.
Do you have a favorite flavor?
I had a really good mango gelato, which probably wasn't gelato, it was probably like sorbet or something, but that's okay, it was delicious. Oh, I miss it. I think I just miss going places. Rose, how about you?
Nice. I love mangoes and I love gelato. That sounds great. I'm Rose. Hers. I like a lot of things. I really like raw cookie dough a lot. Sometimes I'll make cookie dough just to freeze the cookie dough instead of actually making cookies. Because I eat raw eggs all the time. I'm not kidding. I'm fine. So. And I also really love pumpkin pie. And I think Selena and I are going to make a minimum of 4 pumpkin pies next week. For me. So I guess if we need to make more for Selena, like, we can make 4.
If you end up shipping those cookies, please
Yeah.
give me a pile.
shift the pies.
Yeah.
We were also gonna make candles sometime, which is like all this very basic fall activities. But so maybe we'll ship candles along with that.
Yeah, it's a fair package.
Yesterday. So we're on like a baking thing. We made granola yesterday. We're gonna make pumpkin pies. Okay. That's it. Okay. Fran, you go now.
Fran, pronouns they, them, theirs. My favorite dessert, kind of on the same page of the mango sorbet, but I like it in a mangonada, so with like chamoy, tajin, so like sorbet, a little bit spicy, but still cold and delicious, you know. And sorry, oh yeah, sorry, and then, yes, it's you next, sorry.
I'm Selena. I use she, her pronouns. God, I've had so much time to think about favorite dessert, and I'm completely blanking. Something with like peanut butter and chocolate. I love the combinations, like peanut butter and chocolate ice cream, like vanilla ice cream with like little Reese's pieces in it. That would be good. Something like that.
I have to go. I want ice cream now. I'll see you guys out.
No. Just get some ice cream and then come back and we can talk about Persepolis.
Byers now makes like a big thing of non-dairy Oreo ice cream, and since I don't eat dairy, like I'm now appreciated because like before it was like getting like the Ben and Jerry's non-dairy ice cream that was like this big, and $4 or $5, and now like this much for a little bit more, but I'm appreciating the expansion of desserts.
So are y'all ready to talk about this book that we are in? Have your copy too, Jackie.
I do indeed.
Should we start by watching a clip of the trailer that Rose was talking about?
Yeah, I've never seen it, but hope it's good. We'll see how it
Screen share.
Parce qu'on m'a dit, si tu retournes, je sais pas, ceci et cela vont arriver. Mes liens resteraient toujours des liens très très profonds. Nous sommes en train de vivre un moment historique. Mes chers partis. Pauline, tout de suite.
Non, ce n'est pas un comportement digne d'une future prophète.
Mais mon Dieu.
Tous ensemble de marcher vers la démocratie.
Nous aurons enfin une société faite de justice et de liberté.
Le peuple a voté démocratiquement à 99,99% pour la République islamique.
Le voile est synonyme de liberté. Sortez tout en rang. Plus vite.
Rajada, maintenant, t'as pas joué.
Ça, qu'est-ce que c'est? Michael Jackson?
Ça fait 20 ans que je travaille pour ce pays.
Mais j'habite là-bas.
Notre nouveau gouvernement a été instauré. Nous n'avons plus de prisonniers politiques.
Comment osez-vous nous mentir comme ça?
Jamais qui tu es. Et d'où tu viens. T'as vu une révolution et une guerre.
Ah ouais?
Waouh. Balèze.
Allez.
Wow. It really does look like they animated the book. Like it never really ends up that way, you know. Like one of my favorite graphic novels is Paper Girls. That's gonna be like an Amazon series soon, and it's just like it's so colorful, and it's like it's not gonna happen in the series. So it's impressive to see that they stayed true to that. I mean, literally, like looks like they literally just took her drawings and just made them move.
Mm-hmm.
Small appreciation.
And I kind of want to watch the movie just to see if they kept it that way throughout.
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like they just took the pictures and.
And I was like, didn't I just see that on here?
Yeah,
Exactly.
they look so similar.
When was the movie produced? Was it like recently or a long time ago?
I think it's in 2008 at the beginning is when it had.
Oh,
like,
wow,
its-
okay.
I watched
didn't-
it.
Go for it.
Oh, I watched an interview with her talking about the movie, and she was saying that I guess she didn't really want to make one at first. Like she didn't want to translate the graphic novel into a movie because she was afraid it was going to get lost. But then she had a friend who was like coming up in animation, and so she decided to like do it with her really good friend, and so they just like collaborated on it and made it as close as possible rather than like selling it to some like other entity. So it's kind of cool.
I think that's important too, of like when it's such a personal narrative, to be able to be like, I'm gonna be there throughout the whole process, because things get changed.
Imagine this this book made by like Disney or something like that. I know it would never be Disney, but we don't have that many animation studios that are, I guess, mainstream. Anyway, just
If
a
it
weird
was
thought.
if it was Disney, it would be a very different story.
I would be scared to see.
I know. I'm not even gonna pretend to picture that. Oh my goodness.
Did anybody have any like preconceived notions of storylines in the Middle East, or because this is a very recent telling, you know, it's not like years ago, it's somebody who's like, I think she's like our parents' age, not even, she's younger than that, right?
She's literally my mom's age, actually.
Yeah.
She's 1969 and the same year as my mom's born.
Yeah. So basically, like our parents' age. Yeah. So what do you think? Like, did you ever learn about any of this stuff in school? How did it change your perceptions?
I think for me, whatever I was assuming was immediately like, because it was through the eyes of a little girl, like immediately, like I was like, wait, what's going on, right? And so I kind of like was learning with her, and like I didn't really learn about it in school, and if I did, it was like a sentence, you know. So if that, so I think it was really a lot of learning for me and going through it.
Yeah, I second that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to go through like thinking of like what stuff they're mentioning I did learn about in school. It's like, how much of this do I know about? Like, okay, I know about, I think we call it here like the Iran like hostage crisis, is another name for it at the embassy. Like I know about that, but I know about it in the context of like how it affected politics in the United States, you know, like not the real human toll it took or what people there thought of that, you know, because we're not really presented with, you know, outside perspectives on all the things that we've done here in the U.S. to other countries. I think, which is just a big draw of this book in general, just to see these world events through the eyes of somebody else. I mean, was living there, right? Like not just, I don't know, not just somebody who was like alive at the time, but was alive and living in the middle of it. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, like you just barely know some other stuff, but there's something interesting they were talking about. I'll come back to it if I remember. Domestics. I don't know.
I said this to Rose last night, just like, I also didn't really learn anything about this in school, and like maybe I did, but I don't think so. Like the school I went to, the town was like very conservative, and I really don't think that I heard anything about this. So in my head, I just kind of always thought that like Iran and the Middle East in general was like always very religious and very traditional, and like always wore the hijabs or head coverings, or like always had those traditions. And like while some of them are traditions that are like older and stuff that they brought back, I didn't, like you were saying, Rose, it's like not that long ago, and I just didn't really realize that happened there. And they were like modernizing, and stuff was like moving in a certain direction, and suddenly like to flip to this extreme sort of like government and stuff. And so that was interesting to learn, because I felt stupid like reading the book and being like, how do I not know this? And so
yeah, like I mean, like the first page is literally them putting on the veils in 1980, right? Not like 1880. It's 1980.
Like I totally just was fed like the propaganda growing up, because like, I mean, 9/11 happened right when I was 6, so like everything that I can remember is like pretty hateful propaganda. I'm sure there was hateful propaganda before that, but even more so afterwards. And so I guess that's just like where my mind was, as far as like how that part of the world has always been, and it's just not like the truth. I guess it just shows that like we teach the history that we want to we want to have. We're not teaching like what is actually happening, and not just in our country, but like world history as well, which is like, I wonder what other things are wrong that I think I know, but I don't.
Totally. It felt very like, I know this is silly because that actually happened a long time ago, and Handmaid's Tale is fictional and it's more modern than that. But it reminded me of Handmaid's Tale, you know, like while a society is like progressing in a way that allows for more freedoms, suddenly, you know, the other extreme draws everything back. And then it is also just incredible to see the power of like indoctrination and how that is so much more impactful in controlling a population than just sole authoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they were afraid of more than, you know, the particular guards coming to take them away is that their neighbors will tell the guards to come take them away, you know. And so when you create that level of distrust in your peers, like, I don't know, it's just crazy to see how powerful that fear was. And it also makes me think of, you know, places in the world that it's just so different from my everyday life. Like the one I think about the most is North Korea, and how since the 50s, like that has been exactly what this is, like authoritarian fear for death of yourself and of your family and your neighbors, and trying to diminish education and all those kinds of things. You know, I thought it was really interesting to see how quickly people will turn on each other for fear.
I think that came up in the part where like their neighbors across the street, she had a part where she said like they were suddenly the most like devout and like straight-laced people ever, even though like beforehand they were like always throwing the parties and like had alcohol and like went to the protests and everything like before everything happened, and then suddenly they were a family that was like, we are so traditional and blah blah. And just interesting because how you flop because you're afraid.
I remember they were literally saying like her mom's like putting up like black curtains, right? And her daughter's asking like, why? It's like, this is because of the Iraqis, and she's like, no, it's because of our neighbors. And I don't know, that was coming up a lot for me too, reading the book, was like when they're talking about like, I don't know, like she, like, you know, Margie kept asking about like the threats of like the Arabs invading and like the Iraqis, and like she's so consumed by that, and like her parents keep reminding her like, no, we're worried about domestic threats, we're worried about our own government, we're worried about our neighbors. And it's, I don't know, just eerily relevant to the US, you know, and especially, you know, like she talks about in the introduction is when like writing it was important for her, because, you know, like we've been touching on, is our perception in the US is, we're told, just a narrative of terrorism and extremism, right? When in reality, like most terrorist threats in the United States have been domestic, right? And it's interesting that, like, to hear them having the same problem, like the people who we hear in the US, I think what you were saying, Selena, like we've had propaganda since 2001 saying that, you know, calling these people this, and they're worried about the same thing, and they have like the same problems, and it's, I don't know, that's just, I think that's something, even like what bits of education I did get about the area, I would have never gotten, aside, you know, from hearing her perspective on it. It's interesting. I'm trying to remember also a film I feel like I've seen about the fall of Tehran that I swear I watched in history class, because then I was feeling like, did I watch Persepolis? But if you Google the fall of Tehran films, you get the Persepolis film. So I don't know. I had to try to figure out what movie that was. Anyway. Now I've lost my train of thought.
reminds me of like seeing the pictures from like the 60s from that the era of the 60s in that area, and how it just looks like westernized, or and so just kind of like 2 decades later how that can just change because of what happened. And again, as you were saying, how maybe we're kind of seeing that here in the States, where things are radicalizing quickly, and the effects it has because of the fear it incites. The fear is making people radicalize, even if before that they were not there. That fear is powerful in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I also found it interesting that, I think she's a good narrator and that she's willing to admit her mistakes as well. Where, I forget the exact instance, but it's like she's supposed to meet her boyfriend or her husband or whatever, and she accuses somebody else of like bothering her so that she can get away, of them not realizing she's wearing lipstick. I can't remember the exact circumstance, but that she was so quick to be like, oh yeah, I know exactly how the system works, so I can throw somebody else under the bus to make me safe. And then only afterwards, like her mother or her grandmother being like, you realize that person's probably dead now because of what you did, And she's like, wow, nope, didn't think of that.
Yeah, it's nice to see. I mean, that's obviously like not a good thing that happened, but like good to see a flawed protagonist, especially when it is like they're writing about themselves and they're able to like admit those like faults, and it's not just like, well, the neighbors are doing this. It's like, well, I do these things too, to like fit in with the regime. Yeah.
Why do you think she wanted to tell this story in the form of graphic novel? Like, how do you think it aided the story instead of just being like in novel form?
I've been thinking a lot about it, like from the therapeutic perspective of like being able to tell the story in a way that separates it, and that's powerful because we see more in images. And so it creates that creative distance for her to be able to tell this story to more people, because there's things that don't translate into words.
Yeah, just in like looking at the comics, there's so much emotion, but also a lot of care in how things were depicted, where it was, you were seeing the interactions between the people, but you weren't seeing the consequences of some of those actions. And it did feel like it was her caring for the readers and herself in doing that.
Yeah, it wasn't overly graphic as a graphic about war,
Mm-hmm.
And also the fact that it was in black and white, is really interesting.
Like an old comic, sort of, which is interesting style choice. I liked it though. I think she was also just like able to be more frank and like straight to the point of like what was happening, what she was thinking at those times, rather than like drawing out and like describing all these things like in a novel, right, where you have like really long passages. It's like just really to the point. Maybe it's just like a more like hits you faster, I guess.
Because I imagine in like remembering all this trauma, she probably needed that to not have to write it down in words.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like having it be more of like a fact-based like narrative with the words, but even with simple images, I feel like it evoked very visceral emotions. Yeah, I don't know. Like almost the simplicity aided in the storytelling of making the reader draw your own conclusions about the emotions of the situation. Because I'm imagining if this graphic novel were in like perfect detail, like a lot of color and stuff going on, you know, I feel like it would distract from what the message is trying to say.
Also, maybe because she's starting from like being a kid, right? So the really simple graphic style is like a little bit maybe aids the story from like a child's perspective into adulthood.
It's true. It's a good point. Especially that like she's a kid with like a wild imagination too, and like definitely having it in visual form, having it illustrated, lets her sort of like display her imagination like the best she can remember it, as opposed to like trying to like tell us in words. I didn't think about it like that. That's a really good point. I think just on the same line of what you were all saying, it's sort of just like in acting and like in theater, you know, or where you get to see, as opposed to a novel, you know, like what's like there's what's said, but there's also like, you know, there's the subjects and there's the you know, the body language, and you take in how people are reacting and feeling and what they're thinking by seeing them react and not just what they say or what they tell you, you know. When I was looking for an image, just thinking of, you probably aren't really going to be able to see it, but this image after they went out to, Margie and her maid went out to a protest, and her mom comes back and slaps the both of them. Is, I don't know, just the sort of thing that, I mean, because it's just, I don't know, it was a loaded scene, and that was actually the other thing I was trying to remember, the other event that I learned about in school, which was Black Friday, which was something I knew about, but precious little, of course. And also, how messed up is it that we have a capitalist holiday called Black Friday that, you know, came to fruition many, many, many years after, you know, a massacre based on the same name. It's just so American, isn't it?
That was my same reaction. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah. And I feel like I've known it, but I guess maybe just not connecting the dots of just how twisted that really is. And maybe that's something to, you know, a testament to having this in graphic novel form. I'm thinking of images like this, and if it's not super clear on the stream or two, I'll image of many, many bodies of all the massacres that happened on Black Friday and afterwards. And, you know, like you think about, like we talk about the Holocaust, and like people really don't like have an image of, I mean, like really how many people were, I mean, involved, were victims of the genocide there. And that's the same thing here that I think you can get in graphic novel form, that can give you a sense of just how, I mean, just massively devastating that is, that you just, like you see it in words, like you see a number, but it's just something, like I just remember that picture of just like lines of bodies. There's just like several pages of like, there's huge images of like just bodies, you know, that I think, even though it's just like a simplified illustration, it just, I don't know, it makes it more real in my head. I don't know if I'm the only one on that.
No, I think it made everything land more powerfully for me, seeing it as a visual.
Yeah, and that's why I love graphic novels. I read a lot. I'm very nerdy. I love that they, you know, like they do a neat little hybrid of, you know, a movie or a TV show or a play and a novel, and try to pack that into one, right? And try to take you to a place that you're reading and not only seeing, to help you, like, almost like curate your own imagination. And so I wish I had more graphic novels like this. Like they're trying to tell me something or teach me something, you know, as opposed to zombies. As much as I enjoy zombies, but I can think of 2 others, and that's Fun Home, and I know one on what's it called, Super Late Bloomer. But that's it. But it's so effective, and there should be more. That's all.
So
Thank you.
Fun Home the musical, Persepolis the musical.
Oh no.
It's a horrible.
Maybe not.
Oh man.
Wait, plug in. We are, as in the margin, writing a musical about Iraq before this period. So, you know, more info on that later. But it's happening. Not on the genocides, but prior.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Something that you were saying, Jasmine, is like the word genocide, and like me thinking back to my education in like school is the only genocide I can think of that was like labeled as a genocide was the one during World War II, and I think that was only because it was in a war that United States was on the opposite side of that genocide, because they didn't label the consequences of like Manifest Destiny as a genocide, or really talk about the other genocides that happened around the world and labeled them as such.
Right, like the Armenian genocide, wasn't that just like politicized last year? It's just like, I think politicism. Like, how is that open to debate? And it is, yeah. Once again, a very, very American thing, right?
I'm also like trying not to draw too many connections to current U.S. politics, but they're there, and it worries me. And I don't know. I think it's sucks, and it's interesting talking about these kinds of situations. I think we touched on this a little bit last time, like with an older generation. Like I was talking to my mom, she was like, "Oh, did you hear Trump has COVID?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, it's so funny." And I was like, "Yeah, but like think about like what's gonna happen, how they can like change the story of one way or the other." And she was like, "Yeah, I guess you're right, but I'll be dead in 15 years, so you can figure it out." And I was like, "Thanks, Mom." And that's exactly the kind of mentality that I think so many people have as they get older. They're like, not that I'm about to die, but that it's like, you know, I'm doing the best I can, and now that I've worked so hard to get where I am, I'm just gonna coast there. And then if, you know, we can let the young people sort it out if they're having emotional problems about the state of the world, you know.
I mean, something I've heard before is someone saying, "I've done enough, now it's your turn," but the issue there is that the youth and like young adults don't have the agency to do anything. So it's like, okay, if you're saying it's my turn to impact this change, you have to allow me to, or give me the authority to, because then otherwise we're just stuck in the world that you're waiting to die in and not letting me live in the world that I want to live in.
My dad used to, I guess he used to say this thing because he was part of like the hippie Grateful Dead culture, and they used to always say like, don't trust anybody over 30, which I just think is funny. He says, he's like, this is so weird because now everybody who's running our country are those people that were saying don't trust anybody over 30, and now they're like running the country and totally screwing it up. And not doing anything about like the environment stuff. And he's like, you are the summer of love people. It's just interesting how you could get older, like Rose said, reach a point where you're comfortable, you're complacent, and you're like, whatever, the young people will deal with it.
Just the same people who are against term limits on the Supreme Court or the Senate, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetical question, sorry.
I was like, I don't know if those are the same people, but sure.
Probably. Or a similar mindset. Also, speaking of COVID-19, just got my test results back negative. Thank God. So that's good. Sorry, I'm distracted because I just got that right now. It's good.
This is a bit random part of the book, but when she is in Europe and she lost all her money and she's like literally homeless for months and she just couldn't muster up the courage to like tell her parents. I don't know, what do you guys think about that in terms of like how childhood trauma can affect you in your adult life, and even the people that you're closest to you feel like you can't depend on, either because of fear of disappointment and failure or other circumstances? I don't know, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think it's kind of like today how we build online personas for the benefit of making people feel like we're okay. So that would include family members or whatever. And then to do or say something that contradicts what you've been presenting, it's kind of jarring. So I think that's kind of a similar moment of her not wanting to admit that things are not how that she would, the status quo that she has built for her parents and what she assumes their perception is of her is now going to waver. And I think that's a scary moment for anyone, right, if they're trying to present themselves a certain way.
Because I think what you're saying, Fran, about like the roles that we play, and when you've gone through a trauma, your roles like shift, they're not balanced. And so she probably feels that she has to take care of her mom and dad because she knows they're still there. And so she probably doesn't feel safe enough to ask for their help. Because she's like, I need to make sure that I'm okay, that I seem okay to them. So almost taking on the role of the parent.
And I see that with parallels, like with my family, because most of my family is still in Mexico. So like if we're dealing with like poverty or something, they don't really want to hear it because they don't have as many opportunities. And so it's kind of like that weird dynamic of like, but you're over there so you can do something about it. And they're not necessarily wrong, but it's also like, it's hard to provide understanding of an environment they're not familiar with, right? So they're not as familiar with the systemic issues of this country. They're familiar only with the ones of Mexico, and communicating what things limit us and our opportunity is very, very challenging.
I feel like humans are so prone to the grass is always greener mentality, and that can apply, like you're saying, to, you know, a different location that opportunity is there, and so that's why you can't succeed, is because opportunity's over there. You know, so it can be both actual like outside factors, but also a mentality of wanting to be jealous of something else, you know. So do you think, going back to the book about that her parents made the right decision in having her leave? Do you think that her life was truly better elsewhere, even though she was like leaving so young? And like, what would you have done if you were her parents? Easy question. So
the only thing that I was like just thinking is, I mean, obviously the circumstances are hard because their whole family was there and their friends and like everything they knew, but in my mind, if I was feeling like the place was so bad I didn't want my kid there, then I would want to leave with them. But I know that happens like a lot, where parents or family members will send like younger people out of the country for like a better start or better beginning to their life, and they don't follow along. So like there's lots of things that go into that. Obviously it's not just that easy. But in like a perfect world, I think it would have been best for her to like have her family around her while still being able to go to like a more liberal school and like have a more liberal environment. But I don't think in the circumstances she was able to have like both things. So it's hard to say what would be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Here's a question: what are the benefits of her leading that more conservative lifestyle?
Like if she had stayed.
Yeah.
I guess just being with her family, right? And just being with her relatives and friends, but she might not have ever written this book, you know, like she might not ever have like moved out of the country and done all these things with her life. It could have been just like a very different experience. She might have gotten married younger or like not gotten as much education. There's like pluses and minuses to both. Obviously we see the minuses of her leaving, and there definitely would be minuses to her staying. I think one of the main positives would be being around family and like the culture that or I guess the culture changes, but family and just the people that you're used to, feeling like you have a support system around you would be the benefit of staying.
Well, also then maybe if she had stayed, or if she had different influences in her life, she may have come to believe what the government wanted her to believe, right? Instead of being an outsider. And so sometimes I struggle with this. I think just in general of being a more liberal leaning person. I don't know if anybody else might feel this. Make sure I try to word this correctly, but that it's really easy, I think, to kind of have an air of self-righteousness where you're like, well, if only you were educated, you would finally understand. Like if you valued education and freedom like I do, then finally you would come to understand like how much life can be better if you are liberal with me, you know? And so, yes, like it's easy for us to look at an outside perspective of her life, that since she left and had more opportunity and whatever, that she had a better life. But who's to say that somebody who lives in a closed community, like let's say maybe like the Amish or some other kind of like cult, like ignorance is bliss, if they're happy and are not harming themselves or others, even with a lack of education, who am I to say that their entire life is wrong and that they need to gain education in order to truly be happy? When in reality, for a lot of those people, it would shatter their world and they wouldn't be happy. You know what I mean? So, does that make sense? Do you guys ever have that kind of idea about liberalism in that way?
Mm-hmm. And I agree with you, Rose. I think that we, like, one just gets used to thinking that my way is the best way and like proving their point, but it's like we don't know what is best for them in their life and their situation.
Yeah, that's also heavy. Sorry. I was just saying this on another Zoom call, I think just yesterday. But like I hear a lot of people, you know, other people here in America, here in California, you know, and they see everything going on around us, and everything going on around us is very bad right now. There's a lot of bad. There's a lot of horrible. But I keep hearing like the world is ending. The world is ending. Like feels like the world is ending. Like I just feel like the world is ending, and it's like no. Like we're having a really, really bad time in America, but we're not the world though. It's like America's mishandling the virus, but the world isn't ending. You know, we have wildfires, and we're not doing anything about it. But the world's not ending. You know, like Iran is still there, and Australia is still there. You know, and it's once again just like another, like we're so self-centered in the U.S. Like we don't like take in international news like other countries do. You know, like I remember I would like my brother had just graduated college, and he started watching like Al Jazeera America or something like that, and he's like, "There's other things happening in the world," and it's true, and it's just we've like fostered this culture where we just don't care, I guess, right? I don't know how else to put it. So yeah, I mean, it's so hard to think about, like your question, Rose, of like, you know, is it better for like what would you do in the parent situations, like because it's like war-torn country and bombings and everything like that, like versus like I'm remembering, I don't know like to what end in the conversation, but I'm remembering there was a point when I think she was quite a bit younger. It was before the war, and a couple of her close friends they're moving to America. Like they get on a flight to Los Angeles, and one of the boys, like she really liked her, something like that. So she like asked her parents if like about it, and I think like her mom says like maybe it's a good idea, maybe we should go to America. And her dad says like, so what? So you can be a maid and I can be a cab driver? And it's like, fuck. You know, can we swear and it's lit? I just started swearing. Okay, good. It is lit after all. Yeah, but I don't know. It's crazy. Like I said, I don't know to what end I'm remembering that conversation, and maybe you all can do more with that. But it's it's like I don't know. It's so hard for me to even put myself in the parent's shoes. You know, that's how much of a divide there is there. That's wow. Does anybody else think about that with generations also? Like we talk about millennials, you know, like we mentioned before, like that Margie's she's the same age as my mom, right? So like they're the same generation. They're Gen X. I don't know. I'm not one to care much about generations because I think it's so like it's like self-fulfilling, like when it's convenient, and then the opposite when it's not, you know, like it's so like if I'm the same age as somebody who's growing up, you know, like in China right now, like we're both millennials, but what do we have? What do we really have in common besides an age range that like people can't seem to like really decide upon like where that like really begins and ends? And like I was discussing this with my brother not that long ago, and he's like, well, I usually think of it in terms of America. I'm like, do people really think that though? Like they just like, you know, if like a senator talks about millennials in the news and it's like you and your avocado toasts and your iPhones, and it's like, but is somebody, you know, like in Kentucky who's my exact age, like are they really like can we really fall into the same stereotypes like that? So I don't know that kind of thing always comes up in my mind whenever I'm thinking about
I think there can be some truth in it. I'm thinking for at least for us, we maybe experienced the internet for most of our life, but we kind of still remember like dial-up and then maybe not having dial-up. And so there's very much that presence in our life. And then like when we're talking about news, our news now is very individual. You could like find the news of an individual person and just follow that. And then it's kind of, if you're not consuming diverse news, it's because you don't have an interest to. And that's a little difficult to navigate at like a cultural level if before we were on social media as a country already not doing a good job of knowing what's going on in the world, right? So is it a problem? I don't know. Are there solutions? I don't know, but
yeah,
yeah,
you're definitely right. And it's definitely not to say like there aren't, you know, major similarities and like new stories that like rock the world that can affect people on different sides of the world for sure, like 9/11 or the coronavirus, right? Like having a global pandemic, or like a technology or something, and there's just cultural similarities. I guess I get lost thinking about like the overgeneralizations, but yeah, you're definitely not wrong. Like there's that's more of like a devil's advocate view, I guess, about a generation. I don't know why I'm so against generations.
Probably because you don't like people calling you lazy as a millennial.
No, I just want to eat my avocado toast and play my Animal Crossing. How dare they call me lazy?
I feel like the generational thing, I don't know when it was started, but I haven't heard about much before like baby boomers.
Right?
Like Great Depression people. I don't know what it's called. But I feel like that's a little bit more impactful because, and again, it's just a United States thing. I think when people talk about baby boomers, is they're like, oh, because in the United States, like people are like, yay, we won, and now we have all this money and whatever.
There's like
yeah.
Dust Bowl babies or something like that. I don't know. But that doesn't come up, they're in the 1600s or in biblical times or something like that. And Jesus said, no, boomers of Nazareth. I don't know.
I'm excited for 5 years from now when every other TV show is about what people did during COVID.
I know.
It's already started. Like all the advertisements that, like, if you're watching like YouTube or whatever, it's like, we're sticking together during this time selling cars, and you're like, okay.
It's the car ones. I've seen that too. And it's like, we're all in this together, so buy a Toyota. And I'm a little bit triggered about that now. Yeah, watching SNL was trippy last night. If anybody watched that, it was hit or miss a little bit, but it's just trippy to see, an audience full of masks, and Chris Rock like walks out and he takes off his mask and stuff, and it's like, yeah, that's life now. It's trippy. Anyway, we're far away from the book, but it's interesting nonetheless. I'm sorry. There was a question about like American culture, like in the influence on Margie and her friends, right? Say that.
Oh yeah, why does American pop culture have such an incredible influence on her and her friends? So why do she and her family take these risks to have taped posters, jeans jackets, things that represent American culture?
I guess we're already touching on this too, though, right? I mean, it's like sort of like the perception of freedom, of like choice and free will and free expression, whether or not that would actually be the case or not. But that's sort of like what we sell here in America, or at least what people think is being sold.
No, we harp on the faith as citizens, at least in my circle. I feel like we do. We're like, government sucks, like world's ending, we can't believe whatever. And yes, I believe all those things, but also it is insane how the United States has been such a symbol of Western civilization, more than all these other countries that have existed for thousands of years longer, that conquered half the world. Like, why isn't England the center of Western civilization, or France or Germany, or like, well, we know why it's not Germany, which is great. But, it's just kind of crazy that English has become the language, American English has become the global language that like everybody wants to learn and everybody communicates in, and that the US is a symbol for freedom. A little off topic, I went to Vietnam 2 years ago, and when you apply for your visa, it's a visa you get just like at the airport as you're flying in, and it costs like $150, and you have to pay for it in US cash. You can't use. Every single person at GOM has to get US dollars. So people from India, from Russia, from whatever, they have to go to their banks and get US dollars before they fly to Vietnam, because the US dollar is considered to be the most stable currency. And so it has like the highest value because their currency has gone up and down so much. So they stash all in US dollars. It's like, it's if you're viewing the United States from some kind of skewed view from the outside, I can totally understand why everybody is like, that's the place to be, that's what we all are achieving for, right? Because in such a short amount of time of our country's history, we've really made our mark on the map, you know. And so more than it is about like that she loved Michael Jackson, I think it was just that symbol that is so seared into billions of people's minds about what the United States represents. It's impressive.
The only thing that I can like equate in my life experience to consuming media and stuff that like you're afraid of other people finding out about was like in high school, like consuming queer media, right? This is like obviously way less of like a serious matter compared to like the consequences for them consuming American media, but like it's just interesting even for just like queer people in general, right? Like they depend, like their situation could be super serious, their parents could like kick them out or be like violent because of it, but they're still like hiding high heels under their bed or like consuming that media because they just want to like feel a sense of belonging, and it's like you're willing to take that risk because you like need to see people who feel like you and who are like expressing the things that you wish you could express. So that's interesting because it happens on smaller scales, right? Like it's not always just like on a big scale where like in Iran or North Korea or other places where they're like smuggling and stuff and could get in like really serious trouble by death or something, but people do it on smaller scales too, just to feel some sense. It's an interesting like human thing that I think is universal.
The need to have a sense of belonging and like identify with a tribe, right, or a people. Because I had the same experience in high school. Well, and like in like looking for queer literature, or even learning about like Chicano history, which was also not covered, I had to go to a library and like check out a book, and then like upset because I learned that history and like how bad it was. But yeah, it's especially when you're I think younger, that desire is stronger, right? That's like whole like clicking, like the click thing is just a desire to find a sense of belonging with like immediate people or media or anything really.
Which is why representation in media is so huge. Like, I can only speak for how long I've been alive, right? So, and then cognizant of media, maybe not even the last like 10 years of, oh, I guess you're right, there aren't that many people of color in this show and this show and this show, you know. But it just makes me think about, all over the world, all over time, even before television, before radio, before like, you know, were there women going to attend Shakespeare plays that are like, why can't women play these roles? And like, did they have these same kinds of conversations of wanting to feel represented and a part of that? Or even before that, somewhere else, like lots of customs that exclude whatever person. But I don't know, it just makes me feel a little bit more about like the timeline of art, not even exclusively in the United States, of how we're all constantly yearning for that acceptance and trying to find different ways to see ourselves in what we want to be.
I keep thinking about just in it's just in her introduction, and the introduction that she wrote it in 2002, right? So this is right after 9/11, but she says, since then, this old and great civilization has been discussed mostly in connection with fundamentalism, fanaticism, and terrorism. As an Iranian who has lived more than half my life in Iran, I know that this image is far from the truth. That's why writing Persepolis was so important to me, you know, and it, like you just can't help but wonder like if there was like, you know, if there was more representation of the Middle East or more of an examination, you know, into the people and their culture, and that, you know, that just a few radical people didn't stand for, I mean, an entire region's worth of people, multiple countries and all different religions, you know, like how different like Americans' perception of, I mean, just like the whole Middle East would have been over the last 20 years, you know, because we started wars over our lack of understanding, you know. I mean, there's been such horrible, I mean, violence against people with nothing to do, you know, with 9/11 just because of the way they look, and all sorts of, I mean, hate crimes and biases for years and years and years that are going to be ingrained for a long time. And you just can't help but think, you know, like if, you know, like if this was more mainstream, if it was a damn Disney movie or something like that, you know, like how many perceptions that could have changed for a generation of Americans who, like, all they got was the news after 9/11, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's the stereotypes that we have. I recently saw a TED Talk where it was like the one story, I can't remember what it was, but, and how coming from different countries, we have these perceptions of people. So like she was from Nigeria and she came to the United States for school, and her roommate thought that she didn't know how to use a stove. And then she was saying how like the news kept talking about Mexico and how it's, you know, a bunch of drug lords and cartel. And so she went to Mexico and she was surprised to see, you know, warm welcome, a community aspect. And she's like, this is why, because we get one narrative that is usually stereotypical.
Yeah, I had a friend in South Africa in college, very somewhat distant friend, a boyfriend, or my friend's boyfriend, but close enough to a friend anyway. And he was like FaceTiming her one day or something, and we're like, oh, we see your house or something, and he's like, yeah, I live in a mud hut. And we're like, what? And he's like, no, I live in a house. We have malls here, you know? It's like, we don't even, I don't know, you don't think about it. We definitely are fed just that one view, like you said.
I mean, it's also interesting inhabiting. You're like, if you, like when I studied abroad, I studied in England, but because I didn't fit what an American would look like from what they've seen represented in media, it was easier for them to classify me as Mexican, which was fine because I am. And I mean, I spent all my time with speaking Spanish actually, but that it's interesting that they defaulted to Mexican instead of American because I didn't fit that narrative that they consume through media.
There's an interesting quote that I have that the author said, which is, the only thing that I hope people who read my book will see is that this abstract thing, this axis of evil, is made up of individuals with lives and hopes. So, any thoughts on that?
Can you read it again?
Yeah. The only thing I hope is that people will read my book and see that this abstract thing, this axis of evil, is made up of individuals with lives and hopes. So to me, I hear that exactly what we're talking about. It's really easy to just paint a picture of the narrative you've been told of everybody's bad and it's always been bad and don't do that, as opposed to individuals with fears and hopes and lives and trying to survive and, you know, all that stuff.
I think what really stood out for me from the quote that you read was lives and hope. Especially right now, I feel like we all need to remember the individual stories because we're thinking collectively. And we need some hope.
This article thing also recommends that there are 2 other memoirs in graphic novel form that have similar kinds of themes. There's, I think, Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and then Palestine by Joe Sacco. So in case you're looking to find other things similar to this, I haven't read those, but like we were talking about, I really enjoyed this graphic novel medium for like a memoir idea, especially ones having to do with war, and I don't know, I found it really interesting.
It would be kind of interesting to see other memoirs that are done in this style. I wonder if people would do more of these.
Anybody read Super Late Bloomer?
It's
just it's like a really quick read, but it's written by an animator. Her name's Julia Kai, I think. She's an animator or an illustrator, but she like draws characters for like a Disney Channel animated series. But she just started transitioning, I think, like in 2016, and it's just like a little collection of comics, just like detailing just like her first year of like transitioning socially, and it's very interesting too. Even like I'm a person who transitioned years and years ago, but like to read somebody's like all their like private thoughts and like how they're processing like everything that's happening like in the first year of this like momentous thing is so like it's so trippy to like revisit that for me, and I think it like it's very can lead to a lot of empathy for a lot of people, and I was thinking about that like oddly enough in relation to the quote that you were talking about, that the author said, you know, thinking about like behind the axis of evil there's you know, like there's individual lives and stuff, and I know we don't quite think of trans people as an axis of evil, and I know it's weird that I'm relating this to trans people, but bear with me. But I think about it a lot when it's not prevalent as much right now, but I'm sure it'll be back in the news one of these days. But you know, for the last several years we've had a lot of fights about bathrooms and everything, and it's like where, you know, like my daughter in the bathroom, you know, it's like they're gonna have like these people in the bathroom with her, and like the problem that I always have with it, like there's no side of the conversation that's ever like where do the trans people go to the bathroom, you know? It's like, you know, like, okay, like let's say that I say fine, like, okay, like I won't go in the women's bathroom. It's like, so where do I go now? Because ostensibly I'm gonna have a hard time in the men's restroom also, right? And it's like that's never like a part of the conversation. It's like it's always like, well, I'm gonna defend my own, and I'm not gonna think about like you know, what the aftermath that is for someone who's gonna be affected. And I'm still, you know, an American citizen. I still, you know, like I matter to my own end. So it's always interesting. It's like the same for sports. You know, I get a lot of liberal people telling me, and they're like, oh, you can't be in women's sports. And it's like, then where do I go? You know, we just don't think about like how that affects the other person. It feels weird because that's so simple. It feels like it should be more profound than that, you know. But like, you know, us going to war with these countries in the Middle East and stuff like that, you know, you don't think about well, maybe we do, maybe we are now, but I think a lot of the country just doesn't, you know. Maybe we're taught to do that, I don't know, but we should.
Agreed. Go ahead, Celia.
I'm always like, oh, sorry, to go over something. I think it's interesting, that quote, and just everything that everybody said, and what we were saying before about like American culture, and how we like in media, like in movies or TV shows or whatever, like we love stories that are based off of a true story, right? Of somebody who's gone through like incredible hardship, and it doesn't matter if they're like in the US or another country, we like, for whatever reason, I mean, I guess because they're like emotional and right, we can see ourselves in stories of hardship, but those stories are so popular. They're written about a lot. Movies are made about them a lot. But then seeing that one story in a whole culture, like if we're looking at the Middle East, just thinking of like Malala's book and like the movie that came after that, like everybody's able to see that story and be like, oh, what a brave girl, like I can't, like she's done all these things, but then still look at the Middle East as like, oh, all those extremists that live there. It's like, so you're able to see this like individual story, but you can't like put it into the individuals who are there, like that quote saying, I hope that people are able to see like the hope and stuff that is in like the individual lives that are there, because it's not like everybody there is creating the government. They're just living within a system, and not everybody is able to like fly off to America or fly off to England or whatever. Like sometimes you're just in the situation you're in, and like you have to conform to it in certain ways, and like they throw parties and stuff and still drink, but they're doing it in secret. But like I just think it's interesting how we have like this blanket thought process about a country at the same time that we're able to watch these like individual stories and be like, oh, so brave, you know. It's just interesting that we can't put them together.
Yeah, that's true. That's what we're kind of have a similar circumstance with that in America right now, right? Like if you go abroad over the last 4 years, obviously not this year, but you know, people are like, oh, you love Trump, right? Like, oh, everybody loves Trump there, you know, and like a lot of people have to go and explain, like, no, we have a corrupt system and won the popular vote, and most people don't like him here and stuff like that. And it's interesting, you know, like that that we're now on the other side of that, and same with the coronavirus pandemic, I guess. But you know, we're not putting on our best. I just accidentally quoted the president. I realize, you know, but we're not putting forward, you know, like the best representation of ourselves here. Like I just saw an article that I've been wondering about a lot this year, and it just said like other countries like baffled like how a virus could like befall the United States, you know, like how it could send us into such turmoil. And I've been thinking about that a lot, you know. And we've been talking about oh God, what were we talking about? We talked about a lot of things. Just the ways other countries view us, how we view other countries. Man, I totally lost it. Help me if you know what I'm talking about. Damn, it was a good point. I swear it was a good point too.
You got this.
Thanks. I was talking about America and the virus, and that we don't you just hate it when it's a good one? Like it's one line, like just let it go. But it was profound too. I had nice words and everything. I don't know. It is just I do think about it a lot though. It's interesting to see like other countries who, that's what we were talking about, who've seen us, you know, like we talk about like in the book, like these symbols of freedom, you know, whether or not it's true or not, but they still like these tokens of like American culture, like a tie or punk rock, like in the book, you know, like they symbolize something. Like I think a lot about what people think of us now, you know, like what they think of American culture. You know, it's like no, I don't want to relate it to that, but like I'd be interested to like hear what she's saying about the U.S. now, you know, or what Iran is thinking about us. Be very interesting here. But we don't get that in America, do we?
Like,
got it.
What is counterculture, right? And how what is counterculture, and how aware of it would we be from like other countries, right? We are not gonna be taught the counterculture because that country's promoting their like centered culture.
Yay. I feel like that's a good place to wrap up. That was awesome.
Any
closing thoughts?
well, any thoughts on what we should read next?
I hadn't thought about it actually.
So the next one to be determined then?
Let's see. So the first one we read was Jim Crow. And then we did a graphic novel to lighten the mood, talking about horrible governments to lighten the mood. Thanks for that suggestion, Rose. And then the next one, do we want to actually lighten the mood? Like, do we want to do a poetry book? Or do we want to maybe do a fiction novel that touches on themes that we're always trying to learn about?
I mean, the poem sounds really good, like a good idea.
Sure, a book of poems.
Cool.
And Jasmine.
Nothing's coming to mind right now. But either I think reading like an adventure story by like maybe like a BIPOC artist would be cool, and poetry. So maybe we can announce it later. But now that we know that's what we're interested in, it'll be a little bit easier because those books
Looking
sound
at
great.
banned books too. Thought about that? Like, you know, there's like a lot of books that are like banned across the U.S. Like, I saw, I think it was last year, like the most banned book in the United States was like a book about like a trans kid, you know. And I'm sure there's lots more of things that we, you know, value or are normal in our liberal circles that are just completely banned from people reading about in schools is wild. I think that book is called George. I think I have it somewhere. Banned poetry books, banned adventure poetry book by BIPOC artists. Okay, that's too far.
I think the idea of like banned books is interesting because like I said, I grew up in a conservative town, so I remember like certain books being like not available in the library and stuff like that at the school. So that's interesting. While we consider ourselves a free country, right, then like to ban certain media so that we can't like take in all the information. So that's an interesting place.
George is banned. And NBC says this book has been repeatedly banned because it encourages children to clear their browser history and change their bodies with hormones. Which is like really the same thing.
Yeah. Clear that browser history. And while you're at it.
Yeah, I like the idea. Maybe we can look at the banned book list and find something by a BIPOC artist that's either fiction, adventure narrative, or poetry. We can just scan and then figure it out from there.
That'd be cool.
So to be announced later then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alright. It was nice talking to you all.
Nice to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Yes, nice to
Thanks for
meet
letting
you.
me come in and join. I love reading.
Sure. The more
Okay.
people talking about graphic novels, the better for my collection of graphic novels. I mean, for everybody. Till next time.
Yay. Sounds good. Bye, Pete.
Bye,
Bye.
chat. The chat is me, but bye, chat.
Okay. Are we actually discussing anything now?